Shalom, giving all praises, honor, and glory unto Yahweh Bashem Yahushai, Bahashem Rakakwadash, double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone that rule well. Shalom to you, Akim, that be pushing this word around the globe with faith and in truth, as always. This is the brother Caleb from the GMS London Forecasters Camp, back with another lesson. As always, I'd like to start by saying that we are the real Hebrew Israelites, the real Israelites, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Hispanics, Native Americans, West Indians, and West Africans predominantly. But you are going to get Israelites that do look like the other nations, because Israel has been scattered amongst all people throughout our various captivities. But if your seed line by your forefathers goes back to the man in the Bible who was named Israel, then you too are an Israelite, because the book of Numbers chapter 1 and 18, verse 18 states that your nationality is determined by the lineage of your forefathers. So I'm just going to go in this spirit here. I don't really have anything prepared. I'm just going to talk about a subject that I've been meditating on recently, because it's something that I frequently think about myself. And the subject, I don't really know how to describe it. It's basically about knowledge and ignorance. Those are basically two sides of the coin. On the one hand, you've got knowledge, and on the other hand, you've got ignorance. It's kind of like, if you imagine a scale from left to right, and you put 0 on the left being ignorance, and number 10 at the right of the scale being knowledge, you can see there's a clear difference between these two sides. You know, you can either be knowledgeable about something, or you can be ignorant about something. Now, one of the traits that I seem to have observed in my personal experience, just living life, is that as people, as we get older, we generally try to hide our ignorance more and more as we go up in age. If you contrast that to a child, for example, a child isn't ashamed of being ignorant, because a child is a child. A child knows intrinsically that it doesn't know anything, and it has to ask questions. So therefore, children are very inquisitive, and they'll ask a lot of questions. But it seems to me that the older we get, we stop asking those questions, maybe because, you know, some of our parents or our carers or teachers or whatever, when you're asking too many questions, eventually they'll say, stop asking questions. So we kind of learn to stop asking so many questions the older we get. But the trouble with that is that by not asking the right questions, we're not really challenging the boundaries of our own knowledge, because it's a very dangerous thing, because you can end up becoming secure in your own ignorance. And I'd say this applies to the vast majority of adults that I've met just generally in the world, that a lot of adults have become secure in their own ignorance, and rather than admitting that they are ignorant and do not know something about a particular subject, they will try to deflect, mask, or hide their ignorance, rather than just saying, hey, you know what, man, I didn't know about that, or I'm not sure. A lot of people are filled with pride. And what does the scripture say about pride? Let me just quickly get some precept here. I've got Leviticus on the screen, but that's not what I'm reading from. That's just the general page that I opened up my Bible on. So I'm just going to find, I think it's Proverbs, the 6th chapter. I can get this on here, yeah. Proverbs 6. Yeah, this is it. Proverbs 6 and 16, it says, these 6 things doth Yahweh hate. The 7th are an abomination unto him. A proud look, a lying tongue, hands that shed innocent, tongue-tied, slakia. A proud look, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood. A heart that deviseth wicked imaginations, and feet that be swift in running to mischief. A false witness that speaketh lies, and he that soweth discord among brethren. So what does it say? A proud look and a lying tongue. So what I'm saying is that a lot of adults will try to hide their ignorance as a result of their own pride, because they feel like, well, I'm an adult, I should know this, and if I don't know this, somehow it makes me look weak, or it makes me seem inferior, and I don't want to seem weak nor inferior, so therefore I'm going to mask and try and hide my ignorance and deflect any incoming questions that may seem to challenge my knowledge. Now, that's a very dangerous position to put yourself in, because when you do that, you're essentially cutting yourself off from wisdom. And that's not how we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be men of learning, men of wisdom, and men of understanding. There's no shame in admitting that you don't know something, because when you admit that you don't know something, that's the first step towards rectifying the problem. But in order to admit that you don't know something, that means that you have to employ humility. But that's what the Most High respects, and that's what He wants. Because before you're going to be exalted, you must first humble yourself. So it starts at home. It starts with you as a person. You've got to think to yourself, look, you know what? I need to admit that I don't know as much as I would like to know. Therefore, once you do that, you've got the opportunity to start learning, rather than trying to deflect it and say, well, like, I'm going to ignore that. I'm not going to address that. I'm not going to look at that area of weakness. Salakia, I should have turned notifications off, Salakia. But you know what I mean? The point is that if you're ignoring your own ignorance, you're cutting yourself off from that opportunity to learn, which is very, very, very dangerous, because that's the beginning of where stagnation can begin to set in. Now, I want to give an example of what I'm saying here. I was just reading a book, and it made me think about this. Yeah, I'm going to read this book. Apart from this book, it's basically a book on nature journaling, about drawing. A totally unrelated subject, but it's an interesting point. It says, we are born into curiosity, a quality that can either be developed or degraded by experience, and can always be enhanced by practice. Think of curiosity as a skill that you can improve over time. You can train to find yourself. You can train yourself to find rich questions hiding everywhere. Spending time with children can be a delightful reminder of just how many questions are possible. On a walk in the woods, I overheard part of a conversation between a boy and an adult. The child says, well, why are the redwood trees so big? The adult responds, they grow taller than other trees so they can get more sunlight. The child responds, why do they need more sunlight? The adult says, all plants need sunlight. They get their energy from the sun. Sun is like food for the trees. The child responds, why don't the other trees just grow taller too? Adult says, because they can't. The child asks why, and the adult says, enough with the questions already. The admonishment to stop asking questions usually happens when adults reach the boundary of their understanding. Yet we don't only do this to children. Silently and unconsciously we suppress our own internal curiosity when we run out of answers to our own questions. So I'm going to make that point again. It says, the admonishment to stop asking questions usually happens when adults reach the boundary of their own understanding. Now, this is something that you should be aware of within ourselves, because it's only by finding the boundaries of your own understanding that you can begin to realize that, hang on a minute, I don't know as much about this subject as I really would like to. Therefore, once you do that and you would make that once you make that admittment, once you admit that, then you're open to receiving new information and new knowledge. If you always hide from those difficult questions and you never address them, you're going to remain lost. Well, you're going to remain a prisoner within the circumference of your own understanding. You're going to be a prisoner trapped within the fortress of your own mind. These invisible walls will start to come up around you like prison cell bars, and you're not gonna grow. And that's a very, very dangerous position to be in if you're in this truth. Because bringing it back to the scriptures, bringing it back to the understanding of the knowledge, wisdom, and understanding of the Bible, how do you become wise in this truth? You have to study to show yourself approved. Let me get that. Is that 1 Timothy 2:4? Let me just check that. Yeah, it's 2 Timothy 2 and 15. Second Timothy 2 and 15 says, "Study to show thyself approved unto the Most High, a workman that needeth not to be ashamed, rightly dividing the word of truth." You know? So it's a good thing to study to show yourself approved, because the Most High respects knowledge, because he's a power of knowledge. I've got a preset for that here. I guess not. 1 Samuel 2 verse 3 is what I want. This says, "Talk no more exceeding proudly. Let not arrogancy come out of your mouth. For Yahweh is a power of knowledge, and by him actions are weighed." See, so it's not expedient to be ignorant in this truth. It's not expedient to cut yourself off from opportunities of growth and learning, because that's where stagnation sets in. And if you want to be stagnant in this truth, that's akin to being lukewarm. And what did Yahweh Shai say about being lukewarm in this thing? Jump to Revelation, the 3rd chapter. Yeah. So then, because, let me read that up. I know, Revelation 3 verse 15, "I know thy works, that thou art neither cold nor hot. I would that thou wert cold or hot. So then, because thou art lukewarm and neither cold nor hot, I will spew thee out of my mouth, Salakia." But this is the thing, because it's like, it's all good and well to do lessons on topics, and we're supposed to be repetitive in this truth. But there comes a point where if you're only doing the same, if you're only talking about one particular thing again and again and again and again and again and again, because it's easy to you, that's not necessarily good for you, because you're not expanding your range of understanding. Why don't you try maybe talking about another topic and going into that? Because not only will you be expanding your own understanding, it'll help you grow further in this truth. Because yes, repetition is the father of skill, as the apostles say, but repetition without discipline can be adverse. You know what I'm saying? Let's say you're a boxer and you've got a way of throwing a punch, and you throw a punch, but you end up leaving yourself open every time you do it. Are you going to keep throwing that same type of punch, even though you're leaving yourself vulnerable? Yeah, that might work for a few fights. You might get a few wins under your belt, but eventually you're going to come up against someone who's going to be able to exploit that very weakness. And because you've disciplined yourself into doing something repetitively, but not with any discipline, you're making the same mistake over and over again. So therefore, you have to examine yourself. And even the scriptures say that, examine thyself to see if thou be in the faith. Let me get that. It's thyself. Yeah, it's a 2 Corinthians 13 verse 5. Second Corinthians chapter 13 verse 5. "Examine yourselves whether you be in the faith. Prove your own selves. Know ye not in your own selves how Shai HaMashiach is in you, except ye be reprobates?" So really, when I'm doing this lesson, I'm first and foremost, I'm speaking to myself, I suppose, because this is something I've been questioning myself about, because I hate being repetitive. I don't like doing the same thing over and over and over again. It bores me. So therefore, I'm always looking for ways to try and better myself and to avoid stagnation. So when I'm speaking these words, first and foremost, I'm speaking to myself out loud, but also, Lord willing, it's edifying to those of you brethren that are in this faith and are looking to better yourselves in the faith too. Because again, the first step towards improvement is to do the things which aren't easy. Like, it's very easy to keep doing something that's easy because it's easy. But if you want to grow and if you want to get better, you have to start doing the things that are somewhat more challenging. And the more that you do those things which at one point seem challenging, the easier they'll become. Then once you accomplish those things and you've learned how to do things which were once challenging, you've expanded your skill set. And then you move on to the next thing. Expand your skill set further. And again, and again. And this is how you go from level to level, and you grow in this truth. It's the same with anything. If you're learning to play a musical instrument, if you're learning to play a video game, if you're learning to do mathematics, if you're learning to draw, if you're learning to do anything, you have to be able to be realistic with yourself. Not necessarily be overly critical, but just be realistic with yourself and say to yourself, am I really pushing myself to my own potential? Or am I just staying on the same level? And because nobody's saying, hey, you're not doing anything wrong, because nobody's coming up to you and pointing out that, hey, you're not growing, you're just content to just stay on that level, that's not good. Because as I said, that's akin to being lukewarm. That's not being on fire for this truth. That's not wanting to better yourself in this truth. You know what I mean? And that should always be in the back of your mind. You want to please Yahweh Shai, but also you want to better yourself. You don't want to keep on the same level, because as men, we're supposed to grow in this faith. So just some thoughts out loud. I thought I'd just hit the record button and make a video on that. Lord willing, it's been edifying. And see, this is the thing with me, man. I get bored of doing the same thing over again. So I'm going to be looking for ways to shake up my own routine and do things which push me too. Because, you know, I've got to grow too. Yeah, I've got to feed the sheep, but I've got to be growing as well. I can't keep doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over again unto infinity. You know, to me, that's just not how I've been. And, you know, even when I was in the world, I was never like that. I've always wanted to better myself, and in order to better myself, I need to challenge myself. You know, in order to challenge yourself, you need to be prepared to find out where you're weak, where you're not so strong, and to go into those areas and to do those things which yeah, they may seem difficult and they may seem tough, but guess what? Once you accomplish them, the feeling of satisfaction is all the more greater, you know? So hopefully that's been edifying. And yeah, this isn't to criticize anybody or anything like that. This isn't a personal attack against anyone. Just some thoughts out loud, and meditating on the mindset that really is fitting for a man of the Lord in this truth at this present time. So with that, you know, I hope it's edifying. Giving all praises honor, and glory unto Yahweh, Hashem Yahweh Shai, Hashem Makakadash, double honors to the elders and apostles of Great Millstone that rule well, and shalom to you, Archie, and pushing this word around the globe with faith and in truth and in sincerity. And until the next lesson, Lord willing, I will say shalom.